Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on running a successful creative business. This is a three-part series, and today we are presenting part 2, Copyright Basics for Creatives. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator and a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County. I'm going to be your host today, and our presenter is Cliff Ennico. More on Cliff in just a minute. First, some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit national partner of the SBA with over 10,000 volunteers nationally, and locally here at SCORE Fairfield County, we have over 100 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer 3 primary value-added services to small business owners. First of all, we offer free one-on-one counseling, and you can access that in person, by video, telephone, email, whatever works best for you. And you can do that by just clicking on the request a mentor link on our website or via the link that you see on the screen. If I can get Cliff to just move the slide there. Secondly, we offer a wide range of workshops and webinars like the one today. And lastly, we offer extensive resources, including business tools and information on our website. Our next live webinar will be next Tuesday, February the 25th at noon, when Cliff will be presenting part 3 of this series, Trademarks for Creatives. And again, you can find more specifics on our website. If you're on our website, we also have a large number of recorded webinars that cover a wide range of business topics, and you can view those at any time by clicking on On-Demand Webinars. Just some logistics about today's event. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A button at any time during the presentation. And it's generally located in the lower part of your screen, and we'll take as many as we can in the time that we have. We will end our webinar sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, within the next day or so. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Cliff Ennico. Cliff is a nationally recognized small business legal and tax expert and is best known as the former host of Money Hunt on PBS, where entrepreneurs defended their business plans before America's toughest panel of experts. Cliff is an attorney and a small business consultant based here in Fairfield, Connecticut, and has helped launch over 15,000 businesses. He is also the author of 16 books, most recently, The Crowdfunding Handbook, How to Raise Capital for Your Business Using Equity Funding Portals. I'll now turn it over to Cliff. Cliff, it's all yours.
Hey, thanks, Bob. And thank you, as always, for the wonderful introduction. Welcome to everybody, especially those of you who survived the first program in the series, which was last Tuesday at this time. For those of you who did not attend the first session, you can definitely catch it on the archive at fairfieldcounty.score.org. So without any further ado, let's get started. Hang on a second. Let me get here. And let's see, where are we? Why can't I? There we go. Before we do anything, I mean, Bob did say that I was a lawyer by profession, although not by temperament. Before any lawyer tells you what he's going to do for you, he always tells you what he's not going to do. So take a quick look at these slides. Basically, the second one is really the more important one. We are going to get into some legal and tax stuff on this program in a very basic way. There's a very big difference between giving out legal information and giving out legal advice. Saying, hey, this is what the law is generally all about. That's what we're going to be doing today. That's legal information. Giving out legal advice is, hey, Bob, this is what you should do, and Mary, this is what you should do, and Birgitta, this is what you should do different. That's one-on-one advice, which I really can't do on this program. I'll try to answer as many questions as you can. But at the end of the day, if you hear something on this program that you think is a good idea and you implement it and it doesn't work out and you end up, your business fails, you go bankrupt, your spouse divorces you, your kids don't talk to you anymore, and you're living in a diaper box with your dog under the Brooklyn Bridge, there is really nothing you can do about that. You can't sue anybody. That's what this disclaimer says. So let's turn. What is copyright? Those of you who attended the last session, which was sort of a general introduction to a creative business and what makes it successful, the do's and don'ts for making it successful. It's more of a business program, not a legal program. But the one lesson that you should have taken away from that is success in a creative business is not so much about creating lots of art and selling it. It's about managing and controlling your copyright to the works of art that you create. A successful creative business, at least one that's economically and monetarily successful, is really a copyright business. And any artist of any in any medium who wants to become successful has to learn something about the basics of copyright law, which is why we do this program. Okay, those of you who attended the program last week, we did this last week, but for those of you who are new to this program, I just want you to suffer me gladly for just a few minutes. What exactly is a copyright? The best way that I can help you visualize what a copyright is, I want you all to close your eyes here. We're going to pretend we're in California, someplace in Big Sur where it's not burning up. Um, let's just close our eyes, get into a chakra position, and I want you to pretend that we've got the original Mona Lisa. Okay, we borrowed it from the Louvre in Paris, and it's sitting on a table. The exact Mona Lisa that with Leonardo da Vinci painted, including everything down to the last brushstroke. Now, picture in your mind, while the Mona Lisa is on the table here, about 3 feet above the table, there's a hologram of the Mona Lisa. It looks exactly the same as what's sitting on the table down to the last brushstroke, except that it's intangible. You can't touch it, you can't feel it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. It's totally, you can stick your hand through it. It's a three-dimensional hologram. Okay. Okay, that is the copyright. Whenever you create a work of art of any kind, artwork, film, a work of theater, music composition, any kind of work of art at all, you are also simultaneously creating a copyright to that work. And that copyright is a bunch of legal rights, which we're going to talk about in detail in a few minutes, that basically says what you can and cannot do to that particular work of art or its image, which is very important. It has the copyright has nothing to do with ownership. So in your mind's eye now, we're still looking at this image here. You've got the work of art sitting on the table. You've got the hologram of the Mona Lisa sort of floating in the air. Now take the painting away off the table and just leave the hologram floating in space. The copyright is different than the work of art itself. You can do things to the work of art that do not affect the copyright at all. And that's one of the biggest lessons that we're going to be talking about today. A copyright, and you can open your eyes now, by the way. I always worry that people are going to fall asleep if we do this exercise too long. You have the image in your mind now of what a copyright is. It's something intangible that attaches to the work of art when you create it, but it's not the work of art itself. It's something entirely different, and it floats around independently of the work of art. So it has nothing to do with ownership. If you sell a work of art, if you're a painter, let's say, and you sell a work of art at a gallery, you no longer own the work of art. The person who bought it at the gallery is, but you still own the copyright to it. You can make serigraphs, you can make what is it, serigraphs, you can do lithographs, you can do all kinds of authorized reproductions of that work, even though someone else owns the physical intangible object. And what is more, that person who bought your painting cannot do anything, cannot make seriographs or lithographs or authorized reproductions of that because they did not acquire the copyright to the work. All they acquired was the actual physical work of art. A copyright has nothing to do with ownership. What it is a legal monopoly. Now, we live in a capitalist society. Monopolies are not deemed to be good things. There's a whole body of law called antitrust law, which is designed to prevent companies from getting too powerful and having monopoly power over their markets. When a company becomes a monopoly, they can basically set their prices anywhere they want to, and they can hurt consumers. We don't normally like monopolies in our legal system, but here's a situation where the government, the law, is giving you a legal monopoly for a period of time, which varies depending on what the work is. You have the right to exclude others from profiting from that creative work, even if you sold it to somebody else, even if you sold the physical thing to somebody else, you can still profit from the copyright. And this is how artists get wealthy and become successful. Basically, here's a situation where the law, the legal name for something is exactly 100% accurate. A copyright is the right to make copies and publish the work. It contains a bundle of rights which change over time, but that's what it is. It's not ownership. It's the right to make copies of the work, which again operates independently from ownership of the work. What does copyright protect? Copyright protects original works of authorship, and the key word here is original. If you read the copyright law, section 101, it says literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works such as poetry, novels, movies, songs, computer software, and architecture. Build since 1990, I think, or 91, designs of buildings can be protected by copyright. No one can create a skyscraper that looks exactly like the Chrysler Building in New York City. That's what that's all about. It does not protect ideas. Okay, so although it may protect ways ideas are expressed in writing, music, and film. So, for example, if I want to create a series of novels based on a young boy who wakes up one morning and discovers he has wizarding powers and he's whisked off to this alternative universe where he studies wizarding at a wizarding academy, believe it or not, J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter books, cannot do anything to me about that unless I try to steal her specific content. So if I use some of the same names, or if I use a name for the academy that's too close to Hogwarts or something like that, if it's clear that I'm trying to rip off the Harry Potter books, then she can do something about that. But she cannot prevent me. In fact, somebody else has already done it. There's an author named Lev Grossman who wrote a series of books about 10 years ago called the Magician series. I think they're making a movie out of the first one, or they just made a movie out of the first one. And it's basically Harry Potter with sex. This young man, discovers that he has wizarding powers, who is whisked off to a college or university. He's older than Harry Potter. Harry Potter starts in the I don't know, the fifth or fourth, third or fourth grade. This guy goes into college, and so it's basically Harry Potter with sex, basically. But I mean, the three books have been in print now for over 10 years. J.K. Rowling has done nothing about it because Lev Grossman did not really infringe her copyright. You can do a series, you can do a series of books or other creative works if the idea is the same. What you cannot copy is the details that make that work of art unique. We got a question from the floor. Does this pertain to acting gigs on TV show? Is my acting on a TV show copyrighted so that no one can AI my work and make money from my work? Boy, that is a very good question. We're going to answer that in a couple of slides, so just hold on. Okay. But 9 times out of 10, I find that when you ask a question, the answer is on the next slide. I've been doing these for a very long time. So just give me a few minutes and I will give you the world. And if we don't answer your question by the end of the show, we will we'll answer them at the end. Please be sure, by the way, you're posting your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. I don't have that open right now, so I won't be looking at that until the very end. Make sure your questions are in the Q&A boxes. I am looking at that live. Okay, so here are some of the things you maybe can copyright. Your website, original content may be protected. So if I write the text of my website, that text is copyrightable. It's an original work of art. Your domain name, no. You protect a domain name by registering it with a domain name registrar like GoDaddy.com and maybe getting a federal trademark for it. When you talk about domain names and names of products or services, you're in trademark land. You are not in copyright land. We're going to be talking about trademark on next week's program because that's the other big area of what we call intellectual property law that impacts on a creative business. Your recipe for baked beans, no. If it's just a mere listing of ingredients, and step-by-step instructions, no, that is not considered copyrightable. But yes, if it's accompanied by a substantial literary expression in the form of an explanation or directions. That's why whenever you buy a cookbook from a famous chef, they don't just give you the recipe, they tell you the story of how they came up with it. They went to Italy and there was this wonderful restaurant by the sea where they had made this wonderful, squingili, whatever. That's why they always do that, because they're trying to copyright the recipe, by making it something more than just a list of ingredients and how to do it. But a collection of recipes, such as a cookbook, may be copyrightable, even though the individual recipes may not be. This gets very complicated sometimes. Sometimes you can't copyright something, but if you include it with other things, you can copyright it. Your company name, no, you have to get a trademark for that. Whenever you're thinking about putting a name on something, just think this is trademark land. This isn't copyright land. A directory or database. This is a very complicated area of copyright law, but generally, yes, for the directory or database itself. Sometimes the individual items of data can be copyrighted. This is one of those situations where you have to talk to a copyright lawyer because this gets very, very complicated. All right. What about foreign works? What about works overseas? If the author resides in a country, here's the good news, okay? There's good news in copyright land. There's bad news in trademark land, which we'll talk about next week. In trademark land, the world is a very simple place. There is something called the Berne Convention, which actually dates back to 1886, which has been signed by almost every country on Earth. And the basic deal is if an author resides in a country with which the U.S. has a copyright treaty, such as the Berne, and the U.S. is a signatory to the Berne Convention, the work is entitled to copyright protection in foreign lands. So if you are publishing your work, if you go to the Frankfurt Book Fair every spring in Frankfurt, Germany, and you sell the Spanish translation rights to your book over there, the publisher in Spain, the work is considered copyrighted automatically in Spain because of the US copyright. You don't have to separately do a Spanish copyright, although your Spanish publisher probably will anyway, just for bells and suspenders, but you don't legally have to. Copyright in one Berne Convention country is automatically good in all other countries that are signatories to the Berne receptions. But there are a couple of countries that are not signatory. The North Korea is an example. So if when Kim Jong-un does his memoirs, I don't know what's going to happen about that. Okay, so that's good. So when does copyright attach? At the moment of creation. A lot of people think, oh, I got to file with the Copyright Office, but you really don't. When you create the work and you start to publish it, the copyright has attached. The hologram of the Mona Lisa is there. And it's there, and you own all those rights that are in that hologram. You do not have to register your copyright, but it is a very good idea in most cases, because here's why. If you don't register your copyright and somebody else rips you off, you're going to go to court against this person, and this person is going to say is that no, you actually ripped me off, Cliff. I did this work back in 2018. You just published it now. You ripped me off. I didn't rip you off. One of us is going to have to prove the first date of publication or the date of first publication, and registering the copyright is a great way to do that. If you register your copyright and they grant you the copyright, that date where they granted you the copyright, that is irrefutable proof of your date of publication. Anybody who comes along and says, hey, wait a minute, you ripped me off, has the burden of proving that that work was published prior to the date that you got your copyright from the Copyright Office. So it's a great way of protecting yourself against infringement. But you don't have to register your copyright. There are other ways of proving the date of first publication. The most common way is to include what we call the statutory copyright notice on each work or individual page of a website. So for example, here's an example. Now take a look at the copyright notice that I have at the very bottom of the page here. You'll see it's different than the one that is in the text. When I first create a work of art, the one that's in the text is the one I use. But in this case, I've been doing this program for SCORE in one form or another for now it's 11 years now that I've been doing this program. I change it every year. Okay. And because I change it every year, I'm entitled to put that little hyphen there that says 2015 to 2025 Clifford R. Ennico. Each year that I do this program, I am claiming it as a new copyrightable work. And you can do that legally. That is okay. You can do it this way. The statutory copyright notice has three parts. It has the copyright symbol, or you can write the word copyright out. If you're looking for the copyright symbol in Microsoft Word, if you click on insert symbols, insert and then symbols, you'll see a bunch of symbols, and the copyright symbol is in there, along with a lot of others like the R in a circle, which is trademark. So you have the copyright symbol, you have the year, you're saying who owns the copyright, and then you have these words, all rights reserved. Okay, what that means is, hey, unless I have sold my rights to somebody else, all of those rights that are part of the copyright I own. Okay, unless I've given it to somebody else, I'm the owner, and you got to come to me if you want permission to do something with it. Now, so putting the statutory copyright, if it's a website, I always suggest that you put the copyright notice at the bottom of each page, just like I got the copyright notice here at the bottom of each slide. It's a very good thing to do. And that's it. I mean, what that does is that establish, and there are ways that your web designer can say exactly when you posted that copyright notice, and that becomes the irrefutable, date of first publication in case somebody else is accusing you of infringing their stuff. Now, this in the old days, and it's still a very good idea to do. There used to be something called poor person's copyright. Nobody really does it much anymore, but I'm just gonna. It's a cute little historical thing, but also too, you can still do it. If the work of art is a physical work of art, say the manuscript to a book, what all authors used to do back in the day, back in the 70s and the 80s, the day before the internet, the time before what they used to do was they would take a copy of their manuscript, stick it in an envelope. Usually they would do several copies, stick them in envelopes, and then mail them to themselves. And why did they do that? Because when they mailed them to themselves, the post office would put a date stamp and sometimes a time stamp on the envelope. And then when those envelopes came back to the author put them in a file and did not open them. They did not break the seal. Why? Because the postmark it was proof of the date of first publication. Mailing it to yourself, believe it or not, is considered publication for copyright purposes. So those of you who are authors or musicians who are creating physical works of art, mailing a couple of copies to yourself and then just keeping them in a closet somewhere, do not open them. Once you break the seal, then that breaks that kills the magic there. You don't have the date of first publication. Someone theoretically could have taken that manuscript out and put a different thing in. So if you're going to play this game, poor person's copyright, make sure you don't open the envelopes when they come back to you. Now, what about a piece of software or something like that? Well, there are some people who will do the same thing. They'll put it on a physical medium like a CD-ROM or something like that and mail it to themselves. But the better way is to actually take the source code and put it in an escrow with an escrow agent. There are companies out there that do what they call source code escrow. You actually take the hard drive on your computer and you put it in escrow, preserving the exact source code of the software that you wrote. That is another way that you can establish the date that you deposited it in escrow would be the date of first publication. There's all kinds of different ways you can prove publication, but any one that works. The important thing is if you sue somebody else for infringement, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to come back and say, hey, no, this is wrong. You were the one who ripped me off. I published first, and now you have to provide proof of first publication. Who was the first person who published this work? Sometimes it's a bad idea to register, especially for software. If you register with the Copyright Office, whatever it is you're registering becomes public information. I can go on the copyright database and download a copy of whatever it is that you've copyrighted there. So if I'm looking to rip you off in some way and I want to do it legally, let's say it's a software product and I'm a competitor and I'm looking to get a hold of your source code because I want to twist and turn it enough to make it sufficiently different that you can't sue me. You've just published the whole cookbook on the Copyright Office, which is a very bad idea. There are copyright trolls out there, competitors, people in China, North Korea. I mean, I hate to say it, but in some authoritarian countries, there are whole teams of people, hired by the government to do nothing but troll United States intellectual property databases looking for stuff that they can steal. Pick your favorite boogeyman. Whenever something is a trade secret, you should not be publishing it. You should be keeping it secret, like the formula for Coca-Cola is the classic example of that. We're not going to talk about trade secrets a whole lot today. We'll do a little bit next week. But the only way you can really protect a trade secret is to keep it secret and make sure that nobody steals it from you. That's really the only thing you can do. Okay, so let's say you do decide you want to register your copyright. Your lawyer says that there's no downside in doing so. Okay, there are a bunch of different application forms depending on the type of work that is involved. You have to send the correct application form, a non-returnable copy of the work in paper or audio recording form. For most works, for most works of art, the Copyright Office does not yet accept digital submissions. You have to include paper or a physical. When I say paper, I mean a physical version of it or an audio recording format. You can apply digitally, But the PDF file that you attach to it has to be, that live in the physical world. There's a filing fee, which is usually between $40 to $80 per work. You can file electronically, although in some cases you still have to submit a physical, copy of whatever the work is. The Copyright Office publishes a wonderful set of circulars. They're some of the best things that the government does, and they're absolutely free. They all exist on the website at Copyright. That's the Copyright Office website, is copyright.gov. To learn how to file electronically, you got Circular 35, but I'm a big believer. One of the first things that all of you should do if you want to learn more about copyright law is go to copyright.gov, not copyright.com. Okay, copyright.gov, that's the Copyright Office. God only knows what copyright.com is. It's probably a porn site or something. And then /circulars, and you'll get a listing of all of the Copyright Office circulars on just about everything having to do with how you deal with the Copyright Office. They're really wonderful, and because they know most starving artists do not have the money to hire, high-priced lawyers, they're all written in plain English. They're very easy to understand. I look at them myself when a client asks me a copyright question that I don't have the answer to off the top of my head. I look to see if the Copyright Office has a circular on it, and if they do, that's the first thing I read. You do not have to, if you're, say, a photographer that's doing a lot of different works at one time, you're not just doing one work at a time. The Copyright Office does allow you to do group filings. You can register up to 10 unpublished works by completing the online application for a group of unpublished works, paying the fee, whatever it is. It's usually $80 per work, and uploading a separate digital copy of each work in a separate electronic file. This is Copyright Office Circular 24. If you're a photographer, you got a great deal here. You may register up to 750 unpublished photographs in the same manner and only have to pay one fee. You don't have to pay one fee for each work that you submit, and that's Copyright Office Circular 42. The big takeaway from this slide is get familiar with the Copyright Office circulars. They're your best source of information for how to copyright specific things. So, for example, if you are a movie producer and you do a set of still photographs from the dailies, and you want to copyright from the daily shoot, and you want to copyright those, as a specific circular that deals just with that situation. They're incredibly detailed, but they're also very clear. Okay, so who owns the copywriter? The answer is it's you. The author, when a work of art is created, the author or creator, the inventor, if you will, owns the copyright. You don't have to do anything. That happens as a matter of law. His or her heirs and assigns by will. So if I'm a famous author, let's say, and I die, and my will is not very well drafted, it just simply says, "Hey, I'm giving, my favorite, my favorite house to, I'm giving, some things to my wife, a couple of things to my kid, and my residual estate goes to my cousin Joe." The copyrights will automatically go via that residual clause to my cousin Joe. Okay, so that is something. If you are a famous author or a famous, content creator of any kind, you own copyrights. That's what when we say a content creator, we mean somebody that owns copyrights. That's what we mean. Though it's a good idea to make a specific disposition of those copyrights in your will, because otherwise they go in the what they call the residual estate clause, which is like the miscellaneous clause. Anything that I haven't specifically given to other people in this will, here's where it goes. Okay, you don't really want to get that caught up, because you could end up with some people you don't really like owning your copyrights, which is not a great thing. Even if he or she is a minor, there's no legal age limit when it comes to copyrights, although you may not, so if a 12-year-old, and we do know these people, creates a new software product that changes the whole world, like Mark Zuckerberg did when he was a college student at Harvard, the copyright automatically attaches, even though the person is 12 years old, although a 12-year-old cannot legally, in most states, enter into a contract. So they can't really dispose of the copyright without parental permission. His or her employer, if you create a work of art as part of your job duties, okay, there is something called the work made for hire doctrine in copyright, which basically says that your employer owns the copyright, not you. Not the owner of the physical object. Like I said before, If you sell a work of art in a gallery, you still own the copyright to it. There are a lot of copyrights that are still around for works that were destroyed by the Nazis in World War II. The works themselves no longer exist, but the copyrights are still there and they're still viable. They can still be enforced. Also, if you are an independent contract, not your client, we'll talk about this a little bit more. The work made for hire doctrine only applies if you are employed by somebody else, not if you are an independent contractor, a 1099. So what does copyright give you? I've been saying a couple of times here, the copyright gives you a bundle of rights. What are those rights? Well, let's talk about them. The exclusive right to publish and make copies of the work, to make the right to make copies. That's what a copyright is. The exclusive right to profit from the work and any derivative works from that work. We'll talk about derivative works in a minute. The exclusive right to edit, alter, or change your work. Somebody who buys your painting at a gallery, they can destroy it, they can bury it in the basement, they can do whatever they want to do, but they can't alter or change the work without your consent. And then lastly, the exclusive right to sue others who infringe your copyright and make them pay through the nose. Okay. How do you profit from copyright? So now you own the copyright, but how do you make money off it? Okay, you can either sell a copyright or you can license a copyright. Some people talk about assigning a copyright. That is the same as a sale. When you sell or assign a copyright, you no longer own it. It's the same as when you sell the physical painting at the gallery, you no longer own the physical painting. When you sell or assign a copyright to somebody else, you no longer own it. That person now has the right to make copies, and hopefully, if the contract is well drafted, you will get royalties on that, a percentage of the gross sales or the net profit for a period of time, whatever it says in the contract. If you are an author, I mean, I am the author of 17 books. Most of those books I did not self-publish. I had another publisher. Your publisher is guaranteed to want an assignment of your copyright. They don't want you going around making copies that compete with them, at least for a period of years. And they will record an assignment document with the U.S. Copyright Office. You don't have to do that. Whenever you sell or assign a copyright, the assignment document has to be recorded with the U.S. Copyright Office. The same for a patent. In my contracts, my little tip, which I also discussed a little bit last week, but we'll repeat it today for the people who didn't attend last week. Whenever you assign your copyright to somebody else, make sure there's a clause in the contract that says your rights revert to you if the work is no longer in print or sales fall below X units per year. I have written books for publishers that have gone bankrupt, and this clause has saved my life, because basically, if you don't have that clause in the agreement and your publisher goes bankrupt, the work then goes to whoever buys the copyrights in the bankruptcy sale. It doesn't go to you. That's how the Beatles lost control of a lot of the copyrights to their early songs, because their manager Brian Epstein was not a very bright man. He assigned all their copyrights legally to a trust, which ultimately broke up, and that's why Michael Jackson at one point owned all the rights to the Beatles' early songs. I mean, that's how that happened. In case you ever wondered why that happens, make sure there's a reversion clause in any kind of an assignment or sale contract. Licensing your copyright is the better way to go. Licensing, think of licensing as like a lease. Somebody else has the right to do something with your copyrighted work, but you still own it. You haven't given them all of the rights that adhere to that copyright. Think of a copyright as a bunch of pencils. When you hold a bunch of pencils or pens in your hand. When you sell or assign a copyright, you're giving all of those pens or pencils to somebody else. When you license the copyright, you're only giving some of those pencils away. You retain the pencils that you're not letting somebody else use for a period of time. And again, when you license, make sure there's a clause that says when the license expires. When do those license rights return to you? Be very careful when posting your artwork on social media. This is very true of photographers, by the way. Many social media sites, such as Facebook, if you look at their terms of use, there's a clause in there that require you to assign copyright to all postings. So be very careful about that. And they're not trying to rip you off. I'm not going to knock Facebook or LinkedIn or any of these places. They all have the same clause in their terms of use. What they're basically saying is, look, if we see you're doing something really cool on our site and we want to publicize it, we don't want to go back to you and get permission. You're giving us the permission to do that, whatever it is we want to do with your stuff, but it'll benefit you. Don't worry about it. That's why if you're going to put photographs or reproductions of work of art up on social media, make sure you watermark it or do something to prevent someone from digitally making a duplicate copy and going crazy with it. I could give a whole course on that. We talked about the work made for hire doctrine. If the work was created in the course of somebody's W-2 employment, um, the employer automatically owns copyright in the work, but that's not true of independent contractors. Contractors must specifically assign their copyright to a client, or else they retain the copyright. The Reed case was a famous U.S. Supreme Court case. It was handed down in 1989, a piece of Supreme Court trivia. It was the last case that Thurgood Marshall, the first Black justice of the Supreme Court, ruled on before he retired from the court in 1990. The Reed case involved a sculptor, a guy named Reed. He produced a bronze statue for a nonprofit organization in Washington that was going to put the sculpture in front of their main entrance of the building in Washington. It was a statue of a homeless family. The organization was an organization that benefited homeless people. Well, the statute was very avant-garde. Frankly, I mean, I saw it years ago. I went down to Washington and I actually went out of my way to see it. It is a butt ugly statute. I hate to say it. I'm no art critic, but this statute just was not warm, inviting. It didn't really, it didn't touch the emotions at all. A lot of people reacted to the statute the same way, and the organization said, you know what, if this statute's not working for us, we got to change it. We got to soften it. We got to make it more, viewer friendly. They did go back to Reed and say, hey, we want you to make some changes to the sculpture. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. That's my vision. You can't do anything with it. So they hired somebody else to come in, make the changes, and Reed sued for that, for copyright infringement. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court held that because Reed never did assign his copyright to the sculpture, he only sold, even though he sold the sculpture and he got paid well for it, he did not assign his copyright to the sculpture. So the organization could not make changes to it. They couldn't make changes to it without Reed's permission. They couldn't do it. So, that's the Reed case, and that is still the law today, 30 some odd years, 30 some odd years later. So because of that case now, every contract that you ever see now specifically states that, when you're not just assigning the work, you're assigning the copyright. Be very careful. Always make sure that you or a lawyer reads the fine print. But copyrights are not forever. Copyright lasts only for a period of years. After that, the work goes into what's called the public domain, and anyone can publish, copy the work without obligation to the creator or author. And here are the basic rules. For works created after January 1, 1978, so anything that's being created now, copyright protection lasts for the life of the author, plus an additional 70 years. So anything that I write today, if I drop dead tomorrow, my estate, my wife, whoever will be able to benefit from those copyrights, my 17 copyrighted books and all the other stuff I own copyright to, until 2095, which is a long time from now. For an anonymous work, a pseudonymous work, or a work made for hire, the copyright endures for a term of 95 years from the date of its first publication, or 120 years from the year of its creation, whichever expires first. For works published prior to January 1, 1978, it gets a little trickier. You have to look at the copyright law in effect when the work was first published. Here are two excellent websites that will tell you what the copyright rules were. The first copyright law was passed in, I believe it was 1790, was the first copyright law. So these sites will tell you, going back to the very first copyright law, what the rules were at that time. So if you were looking to see if one of Mark Twain's novels is in the public domain, these are the places you can go to find out if it's public domain. Keep in mind that when something is in the public domain, it doesn't mean you can steal it. So if I go out and I publish The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Cliff Ennico, somebody is definitely going to sue me for copyright infringement. I don't have the right to do that. What I can do legally, and I'm assuming that Huckleberry Finn is in the public domain. I don't know, it may not be, but if it is, what I could do is I could do Cliff Ennico's edition of Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. When something goes into public domain, it doesn't mean that it's open to being stolen. What it means is that it's open to being copied. by somebody else who preserves the author's name on it. The publisher, whoever Mark Twain's original publisher was back in 1878, I think it was, or 1876, when Huckleberry Finn was first published, that person, that publishing company or its successors no longer has the exclusive right. They've lost their exclusive right to publish, but it doesn't mean public domain doesn't mean you can steal it. Okay, just be mindful of that. Although it may enable you to write derivative works of the work. We'll talk to you about that in a second. Subsequent editions of a work can be separately copyrighted. That's the little trick that I do in my copyright notice here, where each year I treat this program as a separate edition because it keeps refreshing the copyright date. To anybody who ever went to college knows that each year your textbooks were all updated. They maybe added 5 words to the thing, but they published it as a separate edition. That was so the publisher could preserve the copyright on the work, but not if there were merely editorial changes. So yes, if you added a new chapter, if you added new text, but no, if you merely corrected typographical errors in the earlier edition. That's the rules on subsequent edition. Now let's talk about derivative works here. Now we're getting into some of the fun area of copyright here. Copyright protects not only the work itself, but works based on that work, which are called derivative works. So for example, the author of a Broadway play that's made into a movie has the copyright on the screenplay, unless, of course, he or she assigns those rights to the producer, which he almost always will have to. Otherwise, the producer will refuse to make the movie. The producer of a movie almost always wants the copyright, as they want to control the copyright and the marketing of the movie. So if by the way, if this ever happens to you, congratulations, you are going to be filthy rich here. You give the producer whatever they want to get the movie done. I represent some people who've done independent film producers who get their works picked up by Hollywood, and let me tell you, the fighting over that language is profound. Okay. The law also protects parodies of copyright works, which can be copyrighted in their own right. There are 2 very famous cases from the early 2000s in the Southern District of New York. That's the federal court for Manhattan. And they were decided within a month of each other that are perfect bookends, pardon the pun, for this rule of law. Back in the 1980s, a young lady down south wrote a parody of Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell, the movie that made the famous movie about it and all that. But she did something very interesting. She didn't write, the book did include some of the characters from Gone with the Wind, but the whole story was done from the perspective of a slave on the plantation where Rhett Butler and what was her name were on. She took the story and told it from a slave's perspective, and she called it The Wind Done Gone. Is what she called it. The estate of Margaret Mitchell sued her publisher for copyright infringement. The case went to the Southern District, and the court decided that because the author of The Wind Done Gone did not copy any text or any of the words of Margaret Mitchell's manuscript, she simply most of the characters in The Wind Done Gone are not the same as the ones that were in Gone with the Wind. Rhett Butler appears, what's his name? Scarlett O'Hara is in there, but they're kind of in the background. It's really the slave story of what happened during Gone with the Wind. The court decided that work was considered transformative. It was sufficiently different from the original work that it could stand on its own 2 feet, and the court allowed a separate copyright on The Wind Done Gone. The court dismissed the estate of Margaret Mitchell's claim. Within a month of that case, the court was presented with a second case, and this was a case, so those of you who graduated high school in the United States were probably forced to read an absolutely horrendous novel called Catcher in the Rye. You should be aware, I'm editorializing now. Catcher in the Rye is one of my least favorite books of all time. I didn't read it in high school, actually. I read it in my 30s just because I was so curious about it. And I can't imagine, I don't recall ever having a more negative reaction to a book. I hated Holden Caulfield. I thought he was an absolute jerk. Okay, forgive me. I do not see where everybody say, "Oh, he's emblematic of the modern young man." To me, he was just an a-hole. Pardon my language. Okay. I never got it. But anyway, not everybody feels that way, though. Some people think it's a work of genius, and that's great. Tastes are all different. Um, but apparently, an author in Sweden, of all places, got the brilliant idea back in 2000 of saying, you know what? Well, no, what about if Holden Caulfield was still alive, he'd be in his 60s, 70s now. What would old man Holden Caulfield be like? What would he be like? And he actually wrote a novel. I do not remember the name of it, but it was basically about Holden Caulfield, who's now in his 60s and 70s. I call it Baby Boom Geezer Holden Caulfield. It's not the title of the book. If you read the case, you can see what the book was. But the thing was, but what this author did, though, he included a lot of the experiences that Holden Caulfield had when he was a young man. He actually copied some of his favorite quotes, like everybody being phonies. Of course, the big joke there was Holden Caulfield always talked about everybody else being phonies when he was the biggest phony of all. I thought that was one of the great ironies of Catcher in the Rye. But he did a lot of that, and again, the estate of Catcher in the Rye was, well, I'm having a senior moment now. The guy who wrote Catcher in the Rye, very reclusive author, his estate sued for copyright right infringement. And not only did the court rule in the estate's favor, they actually they banished the publication of the book in the United States. Because they said that because this Swedish author did copy a lot of the original author's text, because he used a lot of the same quotes, the same character. This was the same character, just advanced 50 years. The court said that this was a derivative work of Catcher in the Rye, but instead of giving the Swedish author the estate of the original author royalties on the book, they actually enjoined the publication of the book because that's what the estate asked for. The original author of Catcher in the Rye was very reclusive. He didn't like anybody touching his work, and that his estate sued, to basically prohibit the publication in the United States. So here are two cases, okay, that went opposite ways depending on the amount of detail that the author went into. So if you're thinking about doing anything involving fan fiction or mashups, there's a lot of this, especially in science fiction. There's a whole category of fan fiction of Star Trek, characters and stuff like that. Where Kirk and Spock do stuff that's not in any of the author of the TV shows or any of the movies or any of the authorized books that have been published. If you're thinking about doing any fan fiction or mashups, you really need to become familiar with these cases to avoid accidentally creating a derivative work that the original author will have rights to. To avoid being classified as a derivative work, the subsequent work must be transformative, able to stand on its own. And those are very difficult cases. They're very fact specific. I mean, the two cases that I cite up here, the Windungan versus, the Catcher in the Rye case, these two cases, the opinions are almost 100 pages long. The court really went into detail to see how closely the derivative author had adhered to the original script. They're very difficult cases. You can't really predict what a court is going to do. Just the bottom line here, owners of highly popular works have a lot more money than you do, so don't tick them off. I understand that J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter books, if you go to her website at jkrowling.com, she actually has a set of rules for people that want to do fan fiction of the Harry Potter books. I mean, she did something here that's very ethical. She actually published the rules of what you can and cannot do with the Harry Potter characters. So, for example, you can't have Ron Weasley divorce Hermione and marry Hattie. You have marry and marry Harry Potter. You can't change gender or anything like that in any of these books. That's true of the Star Trek universe too. Okay, so that's the whole rules on. So that leaves us with one more thing to talk about, which is the fair use doctrine. This is an exception to the copyright law that basically says that anyone who uses copyright material in a way that the law deems to be fair use can do that. This is what got most of us through college. Let's face it, most of us in college had at least one class where we had to write a term paper, and we stole with abandon from other published works. And as long as we footnoted them properly and gave the authors credit and did not try to claim their words as our own, we were okay. That we couldn't be kicked out of college for plagiarism. There was an author, I remember her name was Kate Turabian, who wrote a bunch of books back in the 70s on how to avoid copyright infringement when you're doing academic work. And we all had those books, on our desk whenever we did those, because we didn't want to be kicked out of college. There's nothing dumber than being kicked out of college for plagiarism. Let's be very honest about that. Can other people use your copyrighted work without your permission? The short answer is no, unless you let them, unless you give them permission and maybe get some royalties in exchange for that. Can you use other people's copyrighted work without their permission? The short answer is no, unless they let you. So why do I have a book in my library on fair use that's over 600 pages long and has to be updated every year? Okay, why is it? If the rules are that simple, why do I have this book in my basement that's 600 pages long? Okay, let's just dig down a little bit here. As long as you give due credit, it is permissible to use limited portions of a work, including quotes, for purposes such as commentary, criticism, news reporting, and scholarly reports. This is the section of the law that got us through college. There are no legal rules prohibiting the use of a specific number of words. This is a myth, by the way. A lot of people think, oh, I want to rip off this guy's song, and as long as I use less than 7 notes, I'm okay. There are no rules like that. You should be aware of that. There is no such rule. For some reason, when I was in college, I thought there was a rule out there that said that as long as you didn't copy 50 words from a text in the exact same sequence, it was considered fair use. That is not the case, by the way. Fair use depends on all the facts and circumstances. Those of you who are doing rap music, for example, you're sampling other people's music. There are a whole lot of cases here when sampling is okay, and there's a lot of cases out there that say that sampling is not okay, depending on the facts and circumstances. So, how do you find the copyright owner? Let's say that you want to use somebody else's text, and let's say you're a good boy or girl and you want to get permission of the owner. How do you find the copyright owner? Well, the Copyright Office will help you. They charge a fee. Circular number 22 is the one you want to look at. But keep in mind that the people that are going to be doing these searches are summer interns. They're not always the brightest or the most experienced of people. The accuracy of what they do may not be just like I'm sure the Copyright Office is going to invest in AI eventually to do this kind of thing. The accuracy cannot be counted on. There are what they call collective licensing agencies that will help you find authors. And here's an article where you can find those places. There are permissions editors. These are usually retired book editors or music editors that will help you. That will help you for a fee, of course. Find out who owns the copyright. They'll do the research for you. When all else fails, hire a copyright lawyer. Because you can't always presume who owns, especially with movies and stuff like that. When movie studios sell and they change hands and stuff like that, the copyrights sometimes go all over the place. You can't always assume that because movie studio B succeeded movie studio A, that movie studio B acquired all the copyrights. When you're dealing with fair use, by the way, not only do you have to get the permission of the author, but you may have to get permission from third parties. So for example, if you find a photo, I used to represent a lot of eBay sellers, and this used to come up all the time. Somebody, would go to an estate sale, or they go to a junk sale, like an arts and crafts sale or something, and they would find like a carousel of slides from somebody's vacation that they took back in the 1940s and 1950s. And these photos are amazing. They want to publish them because they're so beautiful. They can't find the owner. They don't know who the original photographer was. Not only do they have to get the permission from the original photographer, or their estate if they're dead, but they also have to get permission from the people depicted in a photo to reproduce their likeness. Everybody has a right of publicity in their likeness, voice, or image. In fact, these licenses are called NIL licenses, for name, image, license licenses. If you're doing anything involving a photo of a celebrity, that celebrity has a right of publicity and a right of privacy, which must be respected. Okay, I mean, forgive me. Whenever I do a live presentation, I throw in this next line. I always say, please do not take photos of me while the video is being shot, because otherwise if I ever want to do anything with it, I have to get permission from everybody who appears in the video. That's why I do that. Don't get me wrong, you can take screenshots of the slides. I don't really care about that very much. But of course, if you decide to use them for profit and I find out about it, my lawyers will be all over you. So please don't do that. If the subject of the work is a recognizable person and you want to use the work in a commercial manner, you must get the person's permission. The band Vampire Weekend, they were an indie band from the 1990s and the early 2000s. They ran afoul of this. For example, one of their albums showed a picture of a young woman, sort of, she's like caught in the spotlight. She's walked into a room, and all of a sudden these flashes go off and she looks like a deer in the headlights. Well, it turns out that photo was a photo of a college fraternity party that one of the band members was involved in. This girl had gone into the ladies' room to freshen up a bit, and when she came out, they all decided to tease her, to scooch her. They all got the old-fashioned flash cameras, and they all gave these flash photos as she came out of the bed. She's fully clothed. It's not a dirty picture or anything like that. It's just a caught her by surprise, and she looks like a deer in the headlights. Well, they obviously forgot about this. Somebody found this photo and said, "Hey, this would be a great photo to put on your album cover." And apparently because the photographer was one of the musicians, they all thought, well, we don't have to worry about this. But they should have gotten the consent of that young lady, who now, of course, turned out to be a famous model and a celebrity in her own right, and who brought a suit, and now she gets royalties on every copy of that album that sells. So just be careful. Can you take a photo of a public monument or building and use it commercially? For all you photographers out there, here are the basic rules. Yes, if the building is public and you shoot from public property. Yes, if you are shooting from within a public building. No, if the building is a private residence or privately owned. No, if the building was built after December and has been copyrighted. So the Chrysler Building is a good example of that. No, if the photo includes monuments, sculptures, or other copyrighted works, or if you're in if you're in the Capitol building and you take a photo of what's his name, the famous French sculptor's bust of George Washington. Well, that's probably public domain by now, but be careful about photographing other works that are subject to copyrighted, and know if the building is listed in the Getty Images database. If you are a photographer, you have to be very familiar with Getty Images, because Getty Images is ruthless. Getty Images is a repository of virtually about every historical photo in United States history. And if they see that you are using one of their images without permission, they are ruthless. They will come after you. They will want like a $1 royalty for every day that you had that photo up on your website. And they are ruthless. They do not give in. I have negotiated with Getty Images lawyers. I sometimes can get them to agree to a payment period where they can pay the fee over, where my client can pay the fee over time. But I have never succeeded in getting Getty Images to back down when they go after you. If you are a photographer and you're using a photo that you found somewhere online, check the Getty Images database and make sure it is not there. Okay, so we're pretty much done. You do not have to register a copyright to have one, but you do need to have proof of first publication, which is what registering the copyright gives you. Watch out when creating works based on other people's intellectual property. Always err on the side of getting permission when other people or places get into the works that you plan to exploit commercially. I get requests every week from people that want to use my copyrighted articles. Usually it's professors that want to use them for their classes and stuff. I always say yes. As always, most people will, and I don't charge a royalty for that kind of thing. I'm happy that my work is being introduced to a new generation. But whatever you do not take this program and put this up on your website and charge money for it, because then you'll be hearing from my lawyers, and they are not as nice as I am. Let me just say that right off the bat. Suggestions for further reading. The best sources are the Copyright Office circulators. The Copyright Handbook by Stephen Fishman is now in its 17th edition. Is probably the best places to look. They used to have, No Low Pressure used to have a great publication on fair use, but unfortunately it's out of print now. The best one I found online is Fair Use, Free Use, and Use by Permission by Lee Wilson. This is me. For those of you who wish to reach out to me, I encourage you to do so. I may not be able to get back to you within 24 to 48 hours, but I'll certainly get back to you as fast as I can. And I welcome you, to ask questions. So with that in mind, We still got a couple of minutes left, so let's take a look. I see that most of you put everything in the chat room anyway.
Actually, Cliff, there are some in quite a few in the questions. So we'll maybe just take one or two here because that's all we have time for. We'll take the first one from Annie, which I think you might have covered, but maybe you could comment on. Does this pertain to acting gigs on TV shows? For instance, is my acting on a TV show copyrighted so that no one can AI my work and make money from my work?
Okay, the answer is when you acted on that TV show, the producer made you sign a permission and release form in which you assigned your copyright to them. So the answer is they own the right to your performance. You probably do not have the right to do that. So the big question about can somebody scrape stuff online to train an AI is a very hot area in copyright law right now. There's a massive class action that has been brought by several of the major publishers against ChatGPT and the other AI things, because let's face it, if anybody has ChatGPT and they ask a question about small business management or small business law, chances are that AI has been trained on my content. I have thousands of pages of content on the web, all of which is copyrighted, and that all deals with small business law. And it probably has been, they probably scraped some of my content to train the AI. As an author, I don't like that. I want to be paid something for that. And that's what that lawsuit is all about. It's a very hot area of the law right now. I'm following it with great interest. Um,
Let's take one more from actually this
sure.
one's anonymous. Let's say a person holds copyrights to art, image, IP, and said person wanted to monetize the IP in part to make money to support an artist's legacy. Do you know of any instances in which such a copyright holder established a mutually beneficial contingency relationship with a lawyer whom would only take 1/3 of the money derived, or would it be more advisable for the copyright holder just to try and enforce/monetize copyrights themselves?
Okay. This is a long question,
Yeah.
and I think I actually know who this is. I think this is somebody I've actually spoken to. Let me just say this. First of all, you have to, if you own the copyright to something, then you have the right to make copies. You don't have to get anybody's permission. But the question is, do you own the copyright? Free and clear. Okay. It's a good idea to hire a good copyright lawyer to do a search and make sure that. So let's say, for example, you are a relative of a famous artist, and the famous artist died and left their copyrights to the residual members of their estate. Okay, like I said before, you are the sole surviving heir. Okay, do you own the copyright to that deceased author's works because you are the surviving heir and you're the only one left on the playing field? The short answer is you probably are not. Most wills are set up in such a way that your deceased brothers, sisters, the other people who were heirs of the estate when the author died also own a piece of those copyrights. You own a piece of those copyrights, but you don't own the whole piece of them. You don't own the whole copyrights. That's what a copyright lawyer has to search. And what you're probably going to have to do is go to your nieces, nephews, the descendants of your brothers and sisters, and get their permission, which they probably will grant you. If you're the only one that's going to be doing anything with this, they'll probably just roll over and say, yeah, just give us a few pennies per reproduction. We're fine. That's great. Get it in writing and you're off to the races. But you have to do that. You have to make sure, if you are the sole legal owner of a copyright, by assignment, you have the right to make copies, but you got to make sure that you're right about that, because there's all kinds of ways in which these things can bleed out. Go ahead. I'll share with
Okay,
you.
we are
Yeah,
unfortunately
out of time.
we're over time, and so that's all the time we're going to have for questions today. Just as a reminder to everyone, the webinar has been recorded, and the materials will be available in the next day or so on our website under on-demand webinars. And our next live webinar is next Tuesday, the 25th at noon, when Cliff will do part 3 of this series on trademarks. And again, you can find more details on our website. Again, if you'd want to take advantage of individual counseling, please use the link that you saw on the screen, or just visit our website and click Request a Mentor. And if you could fill out your evaluations that have been sent at the end of the webinar, we'd really appreciate it. We learn a lot from them. And on behalf of SCORE, thank you all for attending today's live webinar. And in closing today, a big thank you to Cliff for presenting a very informative webinar today. Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks, Bob. You too. Take care, guys, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you. Bye.